Hey there, Psycho, heard the news. There's a new podcast made just for you. So if you like Psych and pineapples too, then I know you know what to do. Come on down to Santa Barbara town and get ready for Psyched.
What's up, guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of Psyched, a podcast where we discuss all things psych, the hit USA TV show, and let's be honest, the greatest comedy of all time. From hidden pineapples and crazy nicknames, come on, son, and join me for the fun. If you're a fan of delicious flavor and have heard it both ways, then this is the show for you. My name's Drew. You may recognize me from Season 1, Episode 3, and I'm back to review Season 1, Episode 4, which is, quite honestly, one of my favorite episodes of the season. Episode 4 also has one of my favorite titles, probably, in the history of the show. Of course, Woman Seeking Dead Husband, Smoker's Okay, No pets. I just love it. I love their little bit of humor that they throw in, even in the titles. It's something that makes Psych just such an original and such an amazing show. Of course, this is the episode where Lassie and Jules bring the woman Raylene Wilcroft is her name in the show. They bring her into the police station to warn her that her dead husband, who had apparently was part of a bunch of bank robbers, his partners had got out of prison and that she could be in danger. So, of course, as he's known to do, Sean obviously gets away to be hired by her to find the money that her husband and the men stole, which we find out during the beginning of the episode was never found. So she hires them to try and find the money. And in one of the funniest scenes of the entire episode, Sean conducts a seance, as she is a big believer in all of this stuff, which is what made her, or well, at least she pretends to be a big believer in this stuff. And Sean holds a seance in his room, which is absolutely phenomenal, where they supposedly make contact with her husband, David Wilcroft. Now, after their seance and after their window was busted in one of the funniest interactions of the episode, Sean and Gus do their thing, go out on the hunt and do their best PI work, and find that the David Wilcroft that they supposedly talked to in their fake seance last night, well, he is in fact still alive. And he, just like his partners, have been looking for the money this entire time. David had faked his death and accidentally lost the money, at least according to him. Sean and Gus, of course, and anyone that would hear this story would be skeptical. Now, since we are early on in the season, Lassie refuses to work with Sean one bit, and Sean actually comes up with multiple very good ideas on how to get this money back and how to really put an end to all this, but Lassiter just won't listen to any of it. So Sean and Gus then go out and go to the robber's place, where obviously they get into a little tussle, which they lose, just like they lose every tussle. And right before the robbers were about to hurt Sean and Gus, Sean confesses and tells them that David is alive and wants them to know where the money is and that they shouldn't harm Raylene, which this makes the robbers burst out in laughter, because it turns out that Raylene was the mastermind of the whole plan. So Sean and Gus run back to the cemetery once they find out that that's probably where the money is buried, and they find Raylene, of course. Raylene holds them gunpoint, threatening to shoot both of them, but Sean stalls just long enough for the cops to get there as well, stopping them just in time, and then Sean, in one of his funniest psychic scenes, reveals exactly where the money is. So, very funny episode throughout, excellent casting. The guest casting in this was phenomenal. Two in particular, the first being Anne-Marie DeLuise. She's the one who did play Raylene in the episode. I thought she was a phenomenal casting decision and is an excellent actress, but my favorite of all was at the very beginning of the episode, the believer at the police station, played by Patricia Adlett. She is phenomenal, and I wished she was a regular character on the show. She became a fan favorite. I know a ton of people loved her and loved her scene. I think she briefly appeared or was mentioned in maybe one other episode towards the very end or in one of the movies, was it? I can't really remember at the second. But, she was one of those people that I really thought should have been a returning character and a recurring character, because her and Sean had such a good connection with one another. That scene was so strong. This episode was written by Steve Franks, and he has a wonderful job of, really making the bit characters feel important alongside the main characters, and the interaction between Sean and her was phenomenal, and I really would have liked to have seen how that relationship progressed, because one thing about the show that it left out a lot, especially in the beginning, and I mentioned it a little bit last week, was how Sean gets all this access. His dad being an ex-cop, that doesn't fly. That enough doesn't fly. So right here, it shows you where he has to jump over some hurdles, and it would have been nice to have seen her come back in a couple other episodes and have to jump over those hurdles again, because that interaction was phenomenal. And it was the first time that, outside of Lassie and everyone and Jules and Chief Vic, that he had ever really used his psychic ability to fully trick someone on the police force. So that was definitely one of my favorite scenes of the show. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. Alright, now on to I've Heard It Both Ways, which is, of course, where we examine some plot holes. And there weren't really any plot holes in this episode per se, but there were a couple of goofs at least. They changed locations of where they were filming after season 1 into season 2 for the rest of the show. And one thing that you can blatantly see in season 1 is trees that have absolutely no business anywhere near California, fictional city or not. And you see that a lot in this episode if you look in the background. And so, they were still feeling their way out, and a lot of people probably didn't even realize that they were in Santa Barbara too much yet. So not that big of a deal, obviously, whatsoever, but definitely a little odd when you're seeing trees that belong in Canada while you're supposed to be out in California. And the only other really plot hole, so to speak, it's not a plot hole once again, it's just a goof, but it's a very funny goof, and that, of course, is if you're watching, when they're at the mausoleum, when Sean and Gus approach the mausoleum and they exit the car, if you look in the rear view mirror, you can actually see a member of the crew. You can actually see a crew member's face, which I thought is absolutely hilarious. They like to hide pineapples on purpose, but this crew member's face was definitely hidden, but definitely also an accident. But no real plot holes in this episode. Once again, it was written by Steve Franks. That's someone who is not going to leave plot holes in episodes. It's not going to happen. He created the show. His episodes that he wrote have always been my favorites. He was a writer of Spelling Bee. I mean, so many of the best episodes of Psych are written by Steve Franks. Of course, he's the co-creator, he does the theme song, he does everything, and, when his episodes never really had the big plot hole effect. Now, there are a lot of episodes with some plot holes, but in this one, not too many. And another big reason for that is in season 1, every single episode was treated as its own unique entity. Really, the only carryover is you see Sean mention Lassie's former partner a couple times. Otherwise, none of the episodes really flowed with one another. There wasn't a storyline that continued through multiple episodes outside of, Sean thinks Juliet's hot, which, that was going to happen regardless. So, it was very much just an episodic, procedural type of show at the time. It had not developed into, really fleshing out the characters, fleshing out relationships, and having full-on, season-long cliffhangers, so to speak. And that's always going to lead to less plot holes. So very few plot holes in this, although there are a couple of funny and interesting little goofs throughout the episode. Alright, y'all, and now it's time for Are You a Fan of Delicious Flavor? And this, of course, is where every single week on Instagram, we're going to ask people to tell us where the pineapple is in every episode. As everyone knows, a pineapple is hidden in a specific spot in every episode. Simply reply to that post, and whoever gets it correct will get a shout out on the show. And this week's winner was Leanne Cowan. I hope I pronounced that right, but congratulations, Leanne. And the pineapple in this one was a little sneaky, but it was when one of my favorite characters, Buzz himself, brings Sean a pineapple smoothie. So kind of made it a little obvious on that one. But guys and gals, that's going to wrap up our review of Season 1, Episode 4. Once again, like I said, one of my favorites of the first season. Steve Franks did an incredible job. Funny stuff throughout the entire episode. My favorite part, I think, is when the window breaks during the seance and Gus and Sean are arguing, and Gus is like, Sean, did you do that on purpose? And he's like, Gus, that would have been such a great idea. How come you didn't come up with that sooner? I love it. The banter. You could really see them start to come into their own on this. One of the funniest things about watching the early season is watching how their chemistry was completely organic from the very beginning, yet you see it build through this first season. Once you get to the second season and the third season, it's really there, and you know what's going to happen, you know how they play off of each other. But in this first season, one of the most fun things to me is these lovable characters that we've gotten to know so well and that we know everything about. We get to see kind of the building of those characters and that relationship, and that's one of my favorite things about the first season. And Ford does an excellent job of interactions between the two of them and building those relationships, as well as furthering, his relationships with the police and everyone beforehand. Once again, guys, this has been Drew as guest host for Season 1, Episode 4. I can't wait to review another episode for you guys, but stay tuned for Season 1, Episode 5 coming to you guys next week, you psychos. And as always, remember, just because you put syrup on something, don't make it pancakes.